Welcome to a short introduction to version 6.1 of Systems at Work. The main aim in version 6.1 is to put more functionality in the browser and to remove as much as possible from Clientserver. It's part of our overall strategy, which we'll realize over the coming months and years, of moving everything into the browser. We will retain Clientserver in version 6.1 only for the configuration of the system, the kind of work that consultants do rather than users of the system on a day-to-day basis. That said, for existing clients, it will be possible to continue with prior functions in Clientserver. There's a special access profile that we can make available so that you can continue to use things as you did before. So if we look at data maintenance, we'll see that now a large number of additional record maintenance pages have been made available in the browser. Here I go to data maintenance, for example. We'll see that as well as employees, clients, projects, and tasks and analysis values, which were available before, you can now also maintain client employees, companies, and a host of other record types. In all cases, we have added a very useful new function that puts upload and modification of large numbers of records in the hands of end users. You'll see on all of these data maintenance screens a new function called export import. I can illustrate how that works. If I click here on export import, I have an option to export everything that I see in the grid. And incidentally, you can filter the grid so there are fewer records if you want. And we have an option either to export to Excel only the header labels or all grid records. If I run this, it invokes Excel. Shortly, and here we see all of those records. Because there are address data in the company record, we see quite large rows, but never mind that for now. The point is that every field in the record is represented by a column. Now, what you can do here is to remove as many columns as you wish, as long as you keep the key fields, such as company code, or in the case of employee code, or client code, or whatever. If you remove these columns, you can then add to or modify data in the Excel spreadsheet, and then simply bring it back as an import. And that way, for example, in an employee record, if you wanted to change the cost center, employee cost center, if that was an analysis value on an employee record, then you could export all your employee records, cut the Excel spreadsheet down to just employee code and cost center, and then change the cost centers. And then when you come to do an import, you would use the update option instead of insert. There are lots of possibilities here, and it's fairly obvious how it should work. But the point is that as long as the Excel spreadsheet column headers match the column headers here, you can import data. Of course, you must also have the required permissions in order to be able to do so. Another thing that we've put into the hand of end users is the data dictionary. This is something that often consultants rather than end users would use, but if you wanted, for example, to change the terminology in the system, you could do it this way. We could open the English data dictionary here, and then use the find and replace tool to find, for example, every instance of client and change it to customer, and click on replace all, and it will do it. You have to be careful, of course, because this will pick up these embedded characters. So be careful of what you're doing. We've also added an administration console to the system. This provides a lot of new features, including diagnostics that show you when routing, posting, or approvals were last executed, and when the task scheduler last, in effect, issued notification that it's running, what we call the last heartbeat. We've also got system status data here, who the administrator is, what the product is, the serialization expiry date, how many employees you're using out of your allowable number, as set by serialization, current users in the system, and on average, how long over the last 6 months your employees have spent in the system. We've also got the option here to run programs such as routing and posting. If you click on these, they will open the appropriate pages in those functions. Here also, you can simply by clicking on open accounting periods, open the system parameters page in order to make changes to those periods. It's from here now that you access tools such as ledger modification and export and so on. And there are one or two things here that I'll come to later. So this is a screen that perhaps senior managers, but certainly an administrator, would frequently be looking at. Serialization 2, I should point out, is now done, or can be done now, from the PSW. Click on serialization, and there you have your serialization code. Invoicing has been extended. For a start, we've changed the grid that we use in the invoice worksheet. To illustrate what I mean, we'll click on Create from WIP, and notice here that we now have Create from WIP as distinct from Create ad hoc. That's because we've added these two functions, Create ad hoc and Create client credit note. If I go to Create from WIP, one of the first things you'll notice here is that we've added the possibility of your seeing time and value in this grid. This is the, in effect, one realization of the project portal, and whether you're in the new write-off mode or the invoicing mode or project portal itself, what you see here and the projects that are shown depend upon WIP filters. And you'll see that we've added a few things here. I won't go into detail on that, but effectively this is what controls the content of the project portal in its different contexts. In this context, we're looking at all projects that have work in progress. If I choose one of these and click on Create with Invoice, we'll go to the, first of all, to the invoice header, and then if I click on Worksheet, we'll see all the transactions that are being presented for invoicing. And it's here that I wanted to explain that we've changed the grid that is being used here. So you can't tell from my notebook, this is actually a faster grid. We've got filter and group on all columns. And we've got the option now to modify data in the invoice grid. Of course, when you change things, subject to your having set it up in the right way, there would be an audited modification of your change. The original line will be reversed out and a new line put in. So this grid is now the same as the grid that you would see in approvals and in ledger modification. And incidentally, it also allows you now, with an audit trail, to modify calculation values as well. Always, of course, subject to control. So we have extended options for modification in the invoice grid, and we have new options, as I showed you before. Create ad hoc. So when you click on that, this will show you a rendering of the project portal that shows you all projects that can be invoiced. It will include those which might have work in progress, but it will include those that don't allow work in progress invoicing. But otherwise, the way it works is pretty similar. If I click on Create Ad Hoc Invoice, and then click on Worksheet, we're taken again to the standard grid, but in this case we're creating a new line. And incidentally, even in a work in progress invoice, you can now create a new line. And invoice, counter period, and various other data are pre-filled. So you can, in fact, have a very, very simple kind of ad hoc invoice. I think I've chosen one that is not quite as simple. I'll do that once more. I click on Create Ad Hoc Invoice, header, and rather than choose standard, I'll choose standard ad hoc, and then click on Worksheet. This is a very, very simple invoice indeed. In fact, I think all that I have to do is to enter a value. That I think would be sufficient. Note also that we've added, for convenience, an enhancement we should have done a long time ago, to automatically to check the checkbox here whenever you add something or make a change in a row. So now I can simply calculate this, and this is already a viable invoice. All I would need to do is simply click on Invoice and print it off. Very, very simple case, this one. We intend in due course also to bring into the browser the invoice allocation module, so that an ad hoc invoice can optionally, at some later stage, be allocated to work in progress. Credit notes work in much the same way, effectively ad hoc credit notes. That is an additional feature that you might use when you simply want to credit a value. As you know, we already have the reversal and correction options which pick up work in progress invoices and either release or don't release the work in progress that was attached to those invoices when they're credited. Write-off is an entirely new function. I won't explain entirely how this is set up, and there are no values here in the demonstration database, but effectively this will pick up all cases where there are transactions which are marked as free and which will be effectively invoiced or written off at zero value, and lists all the projects where there are such transactions, and you can then choose them and go into a grid, select the transactions or select all, and then simply write off. As you know, write off will reverse the transaction with a discount record. Prior to this function, you would have to have gone into invoicing to do write-off. Doesn't make sense when you're not actually intending to invoice something. The grid also now supports subreports and linked documents. So in any of those types of invoicing, you can specify that you can drill down to look at other data and look at linked documents, images, and so on. And as I showed you, time and value are now shown in the project portal. Now, something completely different. We also now have the option to specify that an analysis can be a URL. We specify this here. This will mean that any value that you put into the description will be interpreted as a URL. I can, for example, show you that in the employee record, set up an analysis value called his employee Facebook page. And you'll see that when an analysis value is specified as a URL, next to it there will be this little globe. And when you click on that, it will open the URL in a new page. And that goes for inquiry profiles as well. In fact, in inquiry profiles, you would not see the entire address. You just have a very narrow column from which you could link to the URL that is contained there using this globe. There are a few enhancements to form types. I won't explain all of these but in detail or demonstrate them, but for the item view, perhaps I'll just show something like that. When you are using a form item view, let's take this one here, if I can do it. You know, I can, in item view, this row and the header will be shown in a different way on a single page. Now, what you can do with what we call a fixed width item view is to specify that there's a fixed width for this part of the form. And what that means is that you can make sure that the form will look the same way regardless of the resolution on the PCs or notebooks that your employees are using. Otherwise, as you know, the fields will rearrange themselves to fit into the available space. Sometimes, though, you want to arrange that fields are appear adjacent to each other and in certain sequences, and well, not so much sequences, but adjacent to each other. And once you've decided on how you want it to look, you want it always to look that way. And you can achieve that with fixed width on item view. A tiny thing we've done is to pre-fill currency on calculation values, a default currency. So, for example, here, if I'm using the expenses foreign form, I hope that we will see that when I go here to the right, the default currency for Simon Singh is pre-filled. That's something you would specify on the calculations. Of course, it can be changed. That's something that we've been asked for frequently and we've now finally done. Another very small change is that we now make it possible for you to return a form to an authorizer or to an employee or to a proxy when there's an error on the form. Another small thing is that we've added export sequences as a selection criterion on approval profiles. This, for example, would enable you easily to prevent people from changing the approval status of transactions that have been already exported to an accounting system. A tiny thing we've done here, because we've been asked to do it, is on recent forms history and recent timesheets history. We have no longer show the parameters page. So that will show all recent actions over the number of days specified on system parameters. On the company's record, this is a small thing as well, but useful. We've made it easy and possible for end users to specify, for example, bank details and additional data. I would think here you might put tax registration data. And this means that these can be easily maintained and obviously substituted into invoice layouts so that you don't have to put the logic of different bank payment instructions into the layout itself. We have also everywhere where a file can be brought into the PSW, we've provided the facility for drag and drop. I could illustrate that almost everywhere, but actually I will do it on the form because I'll explain something else there. On an expense foreign form, we might well want to attach an image. We make that easier. For a start, you can now drag an image file or any kind of file to this area here, or of course you can, if you click on this, you can invoke the usual browse mechanism. But also, once you've done that, all you need then to do is to click assign and close. So there are far fewer clicks now involved in attaching images. We are also, if an image is very large when it's brought into the browser, it will be automatically shrunk to a specified size. You specify that size on system parameters. And when it is shrunk, it is also converted to JPEG. So that means that you need no longer worry about the size of images. You don't need to shrink them yourself. The system will do it for you. Ledger modification, as with invoice grid and so on, now allows subreports, filtering and grouping, and modifiable calculation values with audit trail. This one is fun for your employees if they're using timesheets. You can now, on system parameters, specify that when anyone logs into the system, the oldest overdue timesheet will automatically and immediately open. You can't still make them fill it in. They can always cancel and move on to other things, but at least it is some kind of prompt. We can also specify that on timesheet type that tasks are not to be shown at all. In multiple invoicing, and there are a few users of this, we now have a silent processing mode so that you don't have to click as many times while the system is scanning through your work in progress to decide what to invoice. There are a few other little things. We finally right-aligned numerical values in active schedules. We've made a small change whereby we now derive timesheet period in, for example, form transactions from transaction date when it's not explicit. This has some subtle effects on reporting. And of course, as you saw, we have new graphics. In my opinion, a much nicer looking login page. We also have the possibility of specifying panel widths. By panels, I mean these panels that you see here. You see that this approve panel, for example, is wider than these other ones. That's something that you can control yourself in the administration console in system data management. There's a new maintenance page called panels where you can specify that something is wider or otherwise. Here we see, for example, that we can say that shortcuts is to be twice as wide. We'll also change the name of it as well if you like. And I think now if we log in again, we'll see that the shortcuts panel is wider. And down here, yeah, so it's wider than it was. And we also have the option now of seeing further workflow steps represented in a new kind of workflow array here. So you can see that this form, which is a historical form, has gone all the way from creation to posting. It's gone through these various stages, and the tooltips will show you where it's been. The red arrow here means that it was returned, and so on. So it's much easier now to know where a form has come from. And that's it. So thank you for listening to this.